Yes, we talked about our surrounding neighbors and United States, China, Japan, and Russia. And about the United States, I said that is U.S. Policies transforming from the rebalancing to Asia to America first, and what kind of impact it might have on Northeast Asia and the Korean Peninsula. Indeed, the United States since 2001, 9/11, was preoccupied with Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Middle East for many years. And during Obama presidency, the United States decided to refocus on issues of Asia. So first they used the word pivot, so pivot to Asia, and then they changed the word later to rebalancing to Asia. And the United States focus on Asia, I think, is important because the US and US-led alliances in the Asia Pacific was the foundation on which the long peace and prosperity was built. And of course, that includes my country. Now President Trump was elected on a different mantra. President Trump believed that this sprawling system of alliances might not be in the interest of the United States. So he instead focused on America first and Make America Great Again policies. And Make America Great Again policies will have to transpire. In other words, President Trump's campaign pledge is well known, but what kind of concrete policies will come from those campaign pledges is still to be seen. So it is still evolving. For example, President Trump said that he's going to abolish Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, but thanks in part to the efforts of my government and also the efforts of some in Washington, D.C. and American industrial sector, President Trump decided not to abolish the KOROS FTA altogether, but instead pushed for negotiations to change KOROS FTA. And it took many hours, and it took a lot of efforts on both sides. But at the end of the day, I believe that the negotiations to change a Korea-US FTA ended up in a good outcome, benefiting both countries. On Korea's part, we gained something in the aspects of ISDS, that is a industry and state settlement of claims. We also gained something about the agricultural sector and the dairy sector. In return, the United States actually gained something important interests in terms of opening up U.S. market to the Korean-made automobiles, especially the Korean-made pickup trucks. And so I think, like in all important negotiations, this KOROS renegotiation outcome represents a balance of interests between the two countries. From my standpoint, one issue is still outstanding. That is, the United States is very concerned about the exchange rate in the Korean foreign currency market. So this issue is dormant, but it can come up. And of course, I'm sure that my government is going to deal with it capably. But I'm saying that still the exchange rate issues can be outstanding in the months to come. Now, the U.S. US-focused policies are pronounced in several aspects of the international security as far as Korean Peninsula is concerned. And one of them is about the combined exercises. Well, traditionally, all militaries believe in training because without training, they cannot maintain the readiness. And if they cannot maintain the readiness, they cannot fight when it is required, like fight tonight. That's a motto of the USFK. And President Trump announced the decision in Singapore that no longer US ROK combined exercises will take place. And true to this commitment, the combined exercises are no longer happening. And I'm sure that the two militaries are trying to find a way to maintain the readiness while the combined exercises are not taking place. And I saw the one example recently, that is ROK Air Force decided to hold the Korea-only unilateral exercises because by this time every year, a combined Air Force exercise named Vigilant Ace has been held, but this year it was canceled. So this is one way to reinforce and make up for the gap. And the other way is that recently I saw the news that US and ROK Marines are going to hold a small-scale exercises. So this commitment and agreement actually apply to large-scale exercises, and perhaps ROK and US militaries can hold small-scale exercises to help maintain the readiness, and this is very important. Another aspect of the security relationship that's affected by Trump administration's new focus is a burden-sharing negotiations, which are currently underway. Burden-sharing negotiations is about how to share the burdens for the stationing cost of US forces in Korea. That began in 1991, when Korea's economy has developed. So there was a request from the United States that now that Korea's economy is in good shape, perhaps Korea should help bear the costs of the stationing cost of USFK. So traditionally, these negotiations take place every 2 or 3 years, sometimes 5 years, which is the case now. And this is about how to share the stationing costs. This year, with the advent of Trump administration, now I think the framework of, or rather scope of negotiations has changed considerably. Now US seems to be asking for the costs, the sum of the costs that is involved in sending the strategic bombers and sending the other strategic assets to the Korean Peninsula. In the past, these exercises or these military actions are regarded as US military actions, and the costs of those actions were exclusively borne by the United States. But now I think US is asking the ROK government to share the part of the costs. And I'm sure that this will change the scope and framework of the negotiations, and this will make the negotiations more challenging. But at the end of the day, having conducted these negotiations 10 years ago myself, I believe that these negotiations about the burden sharing should not and will not undermine the basics of the alliance on which both countries have confidence in. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Korea-China relationship and why the relationship has become more challenging because of the THAAD deployment. Of course, there is a perspective on the part of China, and there's something they can talk about. I can talk about ROK's viewpoints about the THAAD issue. And THAAD is an abbreviation of the terminal high altitude the air defense system. And this is a system that can defend a certain area from incoming missiles in a kind of mid-air altitude. Korea has a Patriot systems that can shoot down the missiles very close to the ground, but THAAD is able to shoot down the missiles between 40 kilometers in altitude and 150 kilometers in altitude. So this is a system that can help protect our territory from incoming North Korean missiles. As North Korean missile capability got stronger, ROK and US militaries felt that we needed to beef up our capability to defend the strategic assets and defense assets, and indeed our population from the North Korean incoming missiles. Now, China was vehemently opposed to this, arguing that missiles are no problem, but radars can cover some part of China. And ROK and US militaries have been explaining consistently, and that's not the case. So I would have hoped that this THAAD problem can be worked out between Korea and China in an amicable way. But that was not to be. So we had difficult couple of years because of this issue. And both countries are affected by this. And in Korea, in certain sectors of the economy, especially the tourism sector, was hit hard by the decrease of the number of Chinese tourists to Korea. Now that we have new government in Seoul, and now that we can probably leave this problem behind us, and that's a very good news. But the way to solve this problem is a Korean government giving assurances, actually 3 assurances to Chinese government. So that was the way this problem had been worked out. I personally believe that this problem can be worked out a little better. The assurances do not affect, I believe, the current government policies, because the assurances reflect the ROK government current policies. But these assurances is about, first of all, is about our national security policies. And I believe that when it comes to national security, we'll have to maintain and preserve the maximum freedom. So, of course, the negotiations probably took place in a very difficult and under the difficult circumstances, but at the same time, I would have hoped that we could have had a better agreement. And these assurances called 3 no's in the press, saying that we would not bring in any more THAAD system to the Korean Peninsula, and secondly, we are not going to join the U.S. missile defense system, and number 3, we are not going to join the possible, it's not happening today, but possible in the future, Korea, Japan, U.S. alliance. Yes, these issues are all in the future, but at the same time, these will probably close down some of the avenues our policies might evolve. And I believe in having options, and I believe in Korean governments having more and more options, not less and less options. And the other aspect, of course, is that when it comes to national security issue, and it's probably good for us to hold fast and stand our ground. And now that we have an example of my country negotiating with China over a national security issues, and that might become a precedent. This is in the past, but like 5 or 10 years ago, when it comes to national security issues, our standard position is that the national security issues will make all the decisions about. If it is the issues relating to the alliance, and my government is going to consult only with the United States. And we don't want any other country to come in and tell us this and that about the national security issues. Of course, these are principles, and principles only work in pure form in the perfect world, and we are not living in the perfect world. But even given that, personally, I had hoped that this issue would have been handled slightly differently. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about Russia. And Russia can be an important player in this part of the world. And Russia was not very active for many years. And we have signs that is going to change. When I was involved in the North Korean nuclear negotiations within the framework of six-party talks, I found that Russia has a very important contribution to make. Russia, other than United States, is the one which has developed and possesses numerous nuclear weapons. And Russia was involved in the denuclearization or the reduction of nuclear weapons negotiations so many times. And Russia, other than United States, is the one coming up with doctrines relating to nuclear weapons. So Russia can actually provide ideas to the six-party talks. And perhaps more importantly, I found Russia is the one which can provide intellectual advice about the nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons doctrines to North Korean delegation. So Russia's role can be valuable in nuclear weapons, and also Russia's role can be valuable in regional security architecture. Russia, from the 1980s, was so eager and enthusiastic about establishing multilateral security architecture, multilateral security forums or dialogues or architectures in Northeast Asia. Perhaps because that kind of multilateral framework can benefit Russia's interests, for sure. As a matter of fact, after the end of the Cold War, in Northeast Asia and Asia Pacific, many countries put forward initiatives to create a region-wide or sub-regional security-focused regional forums. We saw that in Europe, the CSCE, or now it is called OSCE, is helping maintain peace and helping maintain a communication and trust among the countries, and that's good for the peace and security. So we believe that in Northeast Asia, if we can have some kind of regional or sub-regional security forums, it can help our peace and security in this region in a couple of ways. One, these regional forums will help cultivate the habit of dialogue in this region. What this region is woefully lacking is that the habit of dialogue and the practice of cooperation. So when one country in this region increases its defense budget, that is immediately regarded as an hostile action and with worst possible intentions by the other parties. That's what happens. We do not have confidence. That's what happens when we do not have a mechanism to foster confidence. So in that sense, we will do better to have a Northeast Asia, some kind of Northeast Asia security dialogue. I think there are two ways. One is building something based upon something that already exists. That is Korea, Japan, China trilateral dialogue. It began, I think, less than 20 years ago, but quickly turned into a very important summit meeting. And so we can build something in the area of security from the trilateral dialogue that's going on. And in that sense, I believe and hope that all three countries see the values in having these trilateral forums, cooperations, and dialogue, so that this dialogue can be held without much trouble every year, and every year this dialogue can produce a good outcomes. And unfortunately, because of the issues of history and issues of rivaling territorial claims, that affects trilateral dialogue. And unfortunately, it took a lot of trouble for Korea to host the trilateral summit in 2015. And only 3 years later, this year, it took a lot of trouble again to convene the trilateral dialogue. I hope that given these troubles, differences about history and other issues will not go away, and given that trilateral dialogue is valuable to all three countries, so I hope that this dialogue can take place more regularly, and perhaps based upon that solid dialogue, we can build a dialogue about the regional security. And I think we can also invite the beyond three countries. We can invite Russia, we can invite Mongolia, we can invite United States, and perhaps others. And this, I believe, in the long run will be in the interests of every country in this region. And I want to talk a little bit about cyber. This is a new security challenge, and that's becoming more important year by year. So everybody remembers in my country that our agricultural bank, which is one of the largest banks in Korea, the agricultural bank's website was down for a couple of days. And yes, a lot of confusion and trouble and took place because of that. Only a couple of days. So it just went back to the old ways, and thank God they didn't lose any banking records. So nobody lost any money. But that's not the end of the story. If agricultural bank's website is attacked that way, that means there is a potential that all other banks, our financial community, our infrastructure, the running companies can be attacked too. And indeed, actually, the company, a state company running, half-state company rather, running the power plants, nuclear power plants and hydraulic power plants, these companies' website was also hacked. And this is much more serious, because if the hackers wanted to control one of the nuclear power plant, and we are talking about disasters in the proportions of 9/11 and Fukushima, or maybe worse. So this cybersecurity and cyber threats are becoming very, very important. And in the United States, everybody remembers that Sony Pictures website was attacked by the hackers who call themselves Guardians of the World, I think. So these are, I think, wake-up calls this is not bomb. Nobody got hurt. The pictures are not dramatic enough. But I believe when we go deeper into 21st century, and these cybersecurity issues will become one of the most important issues. And also because different from the conventional security issues, in the cybersecurity area, we have no international norms. The norms are being discussed in a couple of forums, and Korea is a part of it. But so far, the international community weren't able to agree on the international norms. And without international norms, of course, the collaboration within the international community against these dangerous hackers are not possible. It has to be case by case, and it is woefully lacking. So I believe that the students of international security will take time to get to know these new challenges, especially cybersecurity challenges, and which will be, I'm sure, will be very, very important down the line.